Okay, not knowing has been probably the most controversial thing that Harry and I ever wrote about, or that I continue to write about, and one of the most misunderstood concepts. And I say misunderstood in the sense of missed, M-I-S-S-E-D hyphen, understood. In other words, that people have developed different understandings of it than we had as we began developing the concept, the idea. And so Lynn, in one interview, I think you were there, she says, well, where did it come from? And it really came from students asking us after a family had left or a client had left, well, what did you really think? What's your judgment? What do you think is really going on between the mother and the father? What did you think about the way the mother put her hand on the son's knee? And we would just simply say, we don't know, or I don't know. That these are questions you shouldn't be asking us. That if these are curiosities you have, you should be asking the family members. They're the important ones. And when people began becoming interested in the Milan idea of hypothesizing, which we really never did because it didn't fit with our work, because we were always interested in the expertise of the client. And then they would say, what is your hypothesis? And we would say, well, we don't have a hypothesis. We said, if you think in terms of a hypothesis, we're much more interested in what the mother's hypothesis is, the father's hypothesis, the son's hypothesis. We're interested in the family member's hypotheses, and each member's. There's no one hypothesis for a family, and that it certainly would not come from us. So we would say we don't know, as a way of emphasizing. Again, there would be discussions about, well, do you think we should do this for next time we meet the family? You think we should do this? And we said, well, you know, these are things you can consider, but when the family comes in, why don't you say, after you left, we had this conversation. We talked about you, and we had some ideas about today, and we don't know where you are today, and what you're occupied by, and how you might like to spend the time, but may we share our ideas with you. And Chris, amazingly, I would say 9 out of 10 times, the learners on our teams had forgotten these very critical hypotheses, these very important questions, these very important pieces of information. And we would always say, you don't have to know, because what happens when you think you know, you prematurely begin assuming and filling in the blanks, and you interrupt the client's story, the client's multiple stories that they will be telling you, and you can inadvertently steer a conversation. Another idea that we got from Bateson, be careful not to steer a conversation, that you can inadvertently steer a conversation in a direction that a client might not have taken it. And that you can also be seduced by one word or one thing a client has said and decide, this is, I think Lynn used to use the word, this is the meat, or something like that, or the stinky or smelly meat. And you can be so captivated by that your nose is drawn to that, and you miss all these other things. So we begin saying, you know, we don't know what's important for the family or the client to talk about. And we certainly don't know how they should be telling their story, or because people don't tell stories. We don't talk with each other in orderly fashions, chronological order, or in those kinds of structured ways. And sometimes we talk fast, sometimes we talk slow, sometimes one person speaks a lot, sometimes one person speaks a little, and we don't make judgments about that. In other words, we want people to present themselves the way they prefer to present themselves, and we want to be able to respond to that, with that, and be able, as Tom and Anna Margrethe would say, walk alongside or walk along with them, rather than trying to lead or guide them in terms of the storytelling process or the storytelling content. One of the things that often happens is that when a concept sort of emerges, like not knowing, or like hypothesizing, or like reflecting teams, that people begin to take them and turn them into techniques or strategies. So the one thing that I want to emphasize with not knowing is that it's not a technique, it's not a strategy, it's not something that you do to for or about another person. It's not something that you just sort of a coat you put on and then walk into the room with that on. But that not knowing is a concept, and primarily it has to do with how one thinks about knowledge and the construction and the creation of knowledge. And of course, my bias has to do with the communal, the relational creation of knowledge, and that it's not something out there like you go on an archaeological dig and find and discover, or that you can give to another person, put into another person's head. So first of all, it has to do with how one conceptualizes knowledge. And then secondly, it has to do with the intent with which you offer your knowledge to another person. So Harry and I would say, and we've written about, and I continue to write about, that anything that I think I might know, I want to offer in a tentative or provisional manner. I don't want to offer it with the intent of, this is something that I think would be helpful to you. This is something that will give you insight. This is the way you should handle your child, etc., etc., etc. That I want to offer it as, this is a possible way to talk about, to think about what we've been talking about, what we've been focusing on. It's an option, it's a possibility. And thirdly, I think that when we offer what it is, what we think we might know, that we want to do that not only in a tentative or provisional manner, but we want to pay attention to the attitude, the tone, and particularly the timing with which we offer it. First of all, I found, and also heard this from learners, that you can think, oh, you really want to say this, or you really want to ask about this, but there's not an entryway into the conversation. And then, just like I was saying a moment ago, then all of a sudden it's not important. The conversation has gone in another direction. That has faded into the background. Something else has come more into the foreground. If it's something that has lingered or stayed with you, then if there's a pause, of course you can offer it. And I think it might be important to offer it for a couple of reasons. Number one, that if you continue to be occupied by a particular question, a particular idea, a particular description or interpretation of another person or what they're doing or saying, then everything you see can tend to sometimes confirm that. In other words, you participate creating the person sitting in front of you. Your questions are often filtered by those ideas. So I find that if you're more open with it and you share it, then it's out there. It can be questioned, and also even the process of sharing it, it begins to sometimes transform into something else, because you never say exactly what you're thinking. So I get real excited when I'm talking about this, as you can tell. I speed up and have lots of things I want to say. But I think the main thing I want to say is that not knowing is a concept. And it's not something that stands alone. It's part of what I call in my writing and in my teachings a philosophical stance. It's a philosophy, a way of being with another person in the world, talking with them, responding with them, singing with them, looking with them, sighing with them,